Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to explore some seriously mind-bending stuff? Today we're looking at Kenneth Grant's Cults of the Shadow,
Cults of the Shadow, a classic.
published back in 1975. This book dives deep into the world of occultism, especially what's known as the left-hand path.
Yeah, Grant really tries to unpack this whole idea of the left-hand path, going beyond those typical black magic stereotypes. He connects it to ancient cults, practices, particularly Tantra.
Tantra.
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
I have to admit, that term left-hand path always sounded kind of ominous to me. What's a good way to approach this idea for someone hearing about it for the first time without jumping to conclusions?
It's definitely a path less traveled, often misunderstood. I guess a good starting point would be to think of it as a way of engaging with those primal energies, those aspects of reality that often get kind of pushed aside, even feared, I guess you could say, by mainstream society.
So we're not talking about like worshiping the devils or anything like that.
Not at all. Grant actually, he directly challenges those simplistic interpretations. Instead, he argues that the left-hand path is about understanding, harnessing those forces, the forces that dwell in the shadows, so to speak, the parts of ourselves and the cosmos that we often try to ignore.
So it's like that saying, where there is light, there is also shadow, acknowledging the whole picture.
That's precisely. And Grant uses all sorts of sources to kind of illuminate this path. One that's really cool is this quote from Eliphas Levi. He was a pretty renowned occultist, and it really sets the tone for what we're diving into today. He talks about a black intelligence.
Black intelligence. That sounds intriguing. What exactly did he say?
Okay, so the quote goes, "The black intelligence is the divination of the mysteries of night, the attribution of reality to the forms of the invisible. It is belief in vague possibility, light in dream. Let us respect the mysteries of the shadow, but keep our lamps burning."
Whoa, those are some heavy words. Almost sounds like he's describing some kind of knowledge that exists beyond our normal perception, something hidden in the darkness. What do you think Levi meant by that black intelligence?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think what he's getting at is the idea that there are certain truths, certain realities, and you can only access those by venturing into the shadows, by confronting the aspects of ourselves and the world that we usually try to avoid. He's saying to do it carefully, though, respectfully.
Like, go ahead, explore the unknown, but don't lose yourself in it.
Right. Don't let those shadows extinguish your own inner light.
Pretty profound when you think about it.
It is. And this whole idea of black intelligence, it really sets the stage for our deep dive into cults of the shadow. Grant uses this idea to explore the left-hand path, showing how it's not about, evil or negativity, but about uncovering this hidden knowledge, harnessing those primal energies, the ones that usually get demonized.
Okay, so we're starting to see how this left-hand path, at least in Grant's view, is more about self-discovery, maybe transformation, than anything sinister. How does he actually unpack this concept? Where does he even start?
Well, one of the key elements he brings in is Tantra, specifically what's called left-handed Tantra.
Oh, Tantra. That's always a topic that gets people's attention. What role does it play in Grant's understanding of the left-hand path?
Well, Tantra at its core is about harnessing energy, particularly sexual energy, and using it for spiritual purposes. And left-handed Tantra, which is what Grant really focuses on, well, it kind of pushes the boundaries. It works with the taboo aspects of sexuality, the things most traditions shy away from.
So it's about confronting those social, psychological barriers that we've built up around certain aspects of sexuality.
Exactly. And Grant actually traces Tantra's origins all the way back to ancient Egypt, showing how it evolved through various cultures, but always carrying those core principles of harnessing these primal energies.
Wow. It's amazing how these ancient practices, often shrouded in mystery, they can offer insights into those deep-seated desires and impulses, the things that still drive us today. It's like we're trying to uncover the roots of human experience.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful concepts that runs through both Tantra and the left-hand path is this idea of Kundalini.
Okay, Kundalini. I've heard of that. Isn't that energy that's said to be like coiled at the base of your spine, like a sleeping serpent?
That's the one. It's often described as a potent force. When it's awakened, it can lead to these profound spiritual experiences, transformations.
So we have this idea of the left-hand path. We have the concept of black intelligence. Now we have Kundalini. It's like we're putting together a puzzle, piece by piece, to understand this whole concept of the shadow.
You're catching on. And to really understand how these pieces fit together, we need to look at another key aspect of Grant's work, his exploration of what he calls Afro-tantric traditions.
Afro-tantric traditions. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. This is where Grant starts to bridge those ancient and modern practices, right?
Exactly. He introduces something called the Afro-tantric tarot of the Kalas. It links African deities with the Tree of Life, which is a central symbol in Kabbalah and Western occultism.
The Tree of Life. I've seen those diagrams, all those spheres and pathways. What's the significance of connecting African deities to that?
It's all about understanding how different cultures, different systems of knowledge, they're all interconnected. Grant's work really challenges those rigid boundaries we create between traditions, showing how these universal principles manifest in all sorts of ways.
So we're seeing how this concept of the shadow, it's not limited to just one culture or time period. It's something much bigger, something that speaks to, I guess, the depths of human experience across any boundaries.
Exactly. And to really grasp this, we need to explore what Grant calls the draconian current. It's a key thread throughout his work.
The draconian current. Okay, that sounds powerful and maybe a little intimidating.
hmm
What exactly is this current and how does it relate to everything we've been talking about?
Well, the draconian current, as Grant describes it, it's this primal force that's been flowing through human history, influencing different cultures, traditions. He traces it back to ancient Egypt, to the god Set, who is often associated with chaos and darkness.
Set, the one who challenged the established order, the trickster god.
That's him. But Grant's point is that Set shouldn't be seen as simply this evil force. He represents those raw, untamed energies. Potentially destructive, yes, but also essential for creation
Yeah.
and transformation.
It's like that saying, you can't have light without darkness, embracing the whole spectrum, even the parts that make us uncomfortable.
Exactly. And Grant suggests this draconian current, with its connection to Set, it's all about tapping into those primal energies that reside within us, those aspects of our being we often try to repress or deny.
Okay, so we have this draconian current, we have this idea of left-handed tantra, we have the concept of black intelligence. How does this all connect to the shadow, the central theme of cults of the shadow?
That's the question, isn't it? And to answer it, we need to delve into what Grant calls the psychosexual dimension of the shadow.
Ooh, psychosexual dimensions. This is where things get interesting. But remember, listeners, we're approaching this with respect and intellectual curiosity, just like we always do here on The Deep Dive.
Always. Grant uses diagrams like something called the psychosexual tarots of the human cross to really explore how these ancient occult principles are actually intertwined with our own, inner landscape, particularly our sexuality.
Hold on, psychosexual tarots. Can you break that down a bit? What are these diagrams all about?
Okay, so imagine the traditional tarot cards, but instead of focusing on general life themes, these cards delve into the specific energies, the archetypes that are at play within our sexuality.
So it's like a map of our inner desires, impulses, but using the symbolism of tarot to understand those deeper patterns.
You got it. And Grant uses these diagrams to connect specific energy centers in the body, they're called marmas, to different sexual practices and experiences, showing how these are all linked to the Tree of Life and the broader themes of the left-hand path.
Marmas. I'm not familiar with that term.
They're kind of like energetic points, like acupuncture points, but more subtle. In lots of Eastern traditions, they're seen as gateways to deeper levels of consciousness.
Okay, so we have these marmas, these psychosexual tarots, and this idea of the shadow. How does this all fit into Grant's overall thesis in Cults of the Shadow?
What he's arguing is that our sexuality, especially those aspects that are often seen as taboo or forbidden, well, they actually hold the key to unlocking hidden potential, to accessing those primal energies that connect us to the cosmos. He's suggesting that by exploring these aspects of ourselves, but doing it with awareness, with respect, we can tap into this deeper understanding of who we are and our place in the universe.
This is getting pretty deep. But I'm starting to see how Grant is weaving all these different threads together, the Tantra, the left-hand path, these psychosexual dimensions, to reveal this hidden tapestry of the shadow.
You're getting it. And to fully appreciate this tapestry, we need to explore the work of a key figure in 20th century occultism, Aleister Crowley.
Ah, Crowley, the infamous Beast 666, a figure who definitely fascinates people, and maybe repels some too. How does Grant bring him into this whole discussion of the shadow?
Well, Crowley is a perfect example of someone who really embodied those principles of the left-hand path, particularly this idea of following one's true will.
Yeah, we talked about true will earlier, that inner compass that guides us towards our authentic selves. And Crowley certainly wasn't afraid to challenge social norms to follow his own path, no matter how unconventional it might have seemed.
Exactly. And Grant sees Crowley as like a modern day embodiment of that draconian current we were discussing earlier.
So Crowley was tapping into those same primal energies, those set-like forces we've been exploring.
Exactly. And that's why Crowley's work is so important for understanding the left-hand path in a modern context. He didn't shy away from those taboo aspects of sexuality or spirituality. He explored them head on, seeking to integrate them into a holistic understanding of the human experience.
Wow, this is giving me a whole new perspective on Crowley. I used to think he was just being, provocative. But now I'm seeing him as someone who was genuinely trying to push the boundaries of human consciousness.
He definitely shook things up. And to really get his impact, we need to dig deeper into his life, his work, and his unique relationship to the Detronian current.
Okay, but before we dive into Crowley's world, let's take a minute to recap what we've covered so far. We've explored this idea of the left-hand path, a way of engaging with those primal energies, the ones we often try to avoid. We've encountered the concept of black intelligence, kind of like a hidden knowledge that exists beyond our normal perception.
And we've delved into the world of Tantra, specifically left-handed Tantra, and its focus on harnessing sexual energy for spiritual transformation. We've uncovered the concept of Kundalini, that powerful energy that lies dormant within us.
And we've begun to unravel the mysteries of that draconian current, that primal force that's been influencing human history for, well, who knows how long.
It's a lot to take in, for sure. But remember, we're on a journey here, a deep dive into the shadow. And just like any good explorer, we need to gather our bearings before we venture further into the unknown.
Well said. So, listeners, take a moment to reflect on what's really resonated with you so far. What aspects of the shadow are you most curious about? What questions are swirling in your mind?
Because in the next part of our deep dive, we'll be exploring the life and work of Aleister Crowley, a man who dared to walk the left-hand path and confront the shadow head-on. It's going to be a wild ride.
Buckle up, everyone. We're just getting started. So let's dive into this Afro-Tantric Tarot of the Callus. You mentioned it earlier, and it sounds like a really fascinating way to bridge those different traditions.
It really is. It's how Grant shows how these ancient African deities, especially those from like West African Yoruba traditions, they connect with the tree of life, that central symbol in Western occultism.
Right, the tree of life. For those of us who might need a little refresher, what's that all about? I know it can get pretty complex.
Oh, absolutely. Think of the tree of life like a roadmap of creation. It's got 10 spheres. They're called Sephiroth. Each one represents a different aspect of divine energy or consciousness, you could say. And they're all connected by these pathways, showing how those energies interact, how they kind of flow into each other.
So it's like a blueprint of the universe,
Yeah.
both the seen and the unseen.
Exactly. And what Grant does, he takes those Yoruba deities, like Obatala, he's the creator god, and Shango, the god of, he maps them onto different Sephiroth.
So he's showing how those African deities, they embody those same universal principles that we find in other mystical systems, like they're different expressions of the same fundamental energies.
Right. Like, for example, he links Obatala with the crown of the tree of life. That's called Kether. It represents, like, pure potentiality, the source of all creation.
Makes sense. Obatala, the creator,
Right.
bringing everything into being.
Exactly. And then you have Shango, who's associated with Tifereth. That's the sixth Sephira, represents harmony, balance. It's interesting because Shango, he's this powerful, dynamic force, but he also brings order, structure.
Like those forces of creation and destruction we were talking about earlier, they seem opposite, but they're really two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And what's so cool about Grant's work, he's not just giving us, a bunch of facts about different traditions. He's showing how these cultures that seem so different, they're actually interconnected, revealing this deeper, more, I guess you could say, primal current that flows beneath the surface of human history, human consciousness.
And that brings us back to the draconian current. How does this force, this powerful force that Grant connects to Set, how does it connect to these Afro-Tantric traditions?
That's where it gets really interesting. Grant argues that the draconian current, with its emphasis on primal energies and confronting those shadow aspects, it's present in many different cultures, including West Africa.
So even though the Egyptian pantheon seems, worlds away from those Yoruba traditions, there's this underlying connection. through this draconian current.
Exactly. It's like this hidden thread, weaving its way through different cultures, expressing itself in unique ways, but ultimately tapping into those same primal energies we've been discussing.
I'm starting to see how Grant's building this complex understanding of the shadow. It's multi-layered. It's not just about one culture, one tradition. It's something much bigger, something that speaks to the very core of human experience.
You got it. And to really get a handle on this, we need to understand how the draconian current manifests within us on an individual level. This is where Grant's exploration of that psychosexual dimension of the shadow, it becomes really important.
Okay, this is where things might get a little spicy for some listeners. But remember, we're approaching this with respect, with a genuine desire to understand.
Of course. And it's important to remember that Grant isn't saying, go out and do whatever you want. He's exploring how these primal energies, often expressed through sexuality, can be harnessed for spiritual growth, transformation.
So not just indulging every desire, but understanding those impulses, working with them consciously.
Exactly. And one of the ways he illustrates this, he connects specific marmas, remember those energy centers we talked about? He connects them with the symbolism of the draconian current.
Remind me about marmas again. How do they fit into all of this?
Okay, so marmas. Think of them like subtle energy points in the body, kind of like acupuncture points, but more esoteric. In a lot of Eastern traditions, they're seen as gateways to deeper levels of consciousness, vital energy.
So Grant's saying these energy centers, these marmas, they're somehow linked to the draconian current.
Yeah. Specifically, he connects the Ajna chakra, also known as the third eye, with Set's role as a seer or a diviner.
The third eye, that's
Yeah.
the energy center associated with intuition, insight, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting because even though Set's often associated with chaos, darkness, he's also linked to this heightened awareness, this ability to perceive things that are hidden from ordinary sight.
It's like those seemingly negative aspects of Set, those shadow qualities, they can actually be a source of wisdom, insight.
You got it. And this brings us back to that concept of black intelligence we discussed earlier, accessing that knowledge that's hidden in the shadows, the mysteries that conventional society often shuns.
Or fears.
It's all starting to come together. The left-hand path, the draconian current, the Afrotantric tarot, these marmas, the psychosexual tarots. It's like Grant's weaving this tapestry of the shadows, showing how all these threads, they're all interconnected. You're getting it. And to really appreciate this tapestry, we need to explore how these concepts manifest in a real-life person. That's where Aleister Crowley comes in.
All right, let's talk about Crowley. He's been kind of lurking in the background of our conversation. Seems like the perfect example of someone who embodied these principles.
He really is. Crowley's life, his work, they provide this fascinating case study for understanding the left-hand path, the draconian current, in a modern context.
Okay, but before we dive into Crowley's world, I want to talk to our listeners for a second. This is some pretty intense stuff. I know some of you might be feeling a little overwhelmed.
That's understandable. These are complex concepts, and they really challenge a lot of our preconceived ideas about spirituality, the nature of reality.
Right, so if you're feeling a bit lost or confused, don't worry. It's all part of the journey. Take a moment to breathe. Reflect on what's resonated with you so far.
Yeah, what images, what ideas have stuck with you? What questions are swirling around in your mind?
Because in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore the life and work of Aleister Crowley, a man who dared to walk the left-hand path and confront the shadow head-on. Trust me, it's going to be a wild ride.
Buckle up, everyone. We're about to enter the realm of the beast.
Okay, so Crowley. He seems to embody so much of what we've been talking about with a shadow and the left-hand path.
Yeah, he really is a fascinating and complex figure. Crowley, he was a poet, a mountaineer, a magician, and he actually called himself a prophet, challenged those social norms, embraced those taboo aspects of spirituality that a lot of people they kind of shy away from.
And like we've been exploring, Grant suggests that Crowley's path, it wasn't just about, rebellion or shock value. He was really trying to tap into these primal energies, this hidden knowledge.
Exactly. Remember that concept of true will, that driving force that kind of guides us toward our true selves. Grant's argument is that Crowley's true will, it led him to embrace that draconian current, to confront the shadow aspects of reality, the stuff most people they try to repress or deny.
Right, aligning with that deep inner compass, even if it takes you off the well-worn path. And Crowley definitely wasn't afraid to forge his own way, even if it meant clashing with conventional morality.
Not at all. And one of the key events in Crowley's life that really shows this is the Cairo working. We touched on it a bit earlier. That's where he received the Book of the Law, the central text of his system of Thelema.
Right, Thelema, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
What was Crowley's goal with Thelema? What was he even trying to do?
Crowley believed that Thelema, it marked the start of a new eon, like a new era of human consciousness. He felt humanity was evolving, and his work was like essential for guiding that evolution.
So he saw himself as a kind of prophet, bringing in this new age.
In a way, yeah. He thought he was getting instructions from a higher intelligence, called it Awas. And that Thelema was like the blueprint for this new eon.
And this is where Grant's interpretation gets really interesting. He suggests that Crowley was channeling the draconian current during that Cairo working, tapping into that primal energy, that set-like energy, the one that represents those hidden aspects of reality, the taboo stuff.
Exactly. And that suggests that Thelema itself, with its emphasis on individual will and going beyond conventional morality, it's all rooted in this ancient draconian current. It's about confronting those shadow aspects of ourselves, of the world, not to destroy them, but to integrate them into a more holistic understanding of reality.
Okay, I'm starting to get how this all connects. Crowley, through Thelema, was trying to push humanity beyond those limitations, the ones we place on ourselves, those social and psychological barriers that keep us from reaching our full potential.
That's it. And this is where the concept of magical obsession comes in.
Magical obsession. That sounds pretty intense. What does that even mean?
It's basically when you become so fixated on a specific magical goal or belief that it just consumes you. It can lead to imbalance, even psychological harm. Grant uses the example of Crowley's his magical son, a guy named Frederick Cad, to illustrate this.
Right, Frederick Cad. You mentioned him earlier. Could you tell us a bit more about him and how his story connects to this magical obsession?
Shad was this brilliant young occultist, got really involved in Crowley's system of Thelema. He was incredibly dedicated, made some real contributions to Crowley's work. But eventually he had a breakdown, experienced a pretty severe case of magical obsession.
What happened? Did he get, I don't know, too wrapped up in Crowley's teachings?
Well, in a way, yeah. Chad started believing that he had received this new revelation, and it kind of superseded Crowley's work. It caused a rift between them. And Chad's obsession with this new revelation, well, it ultimately led to his downfall. It shows the dangers of working with these powerful energies without the right guidance, without balance.
So it's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Reminding us that this path of the shadow, it's transformative, but it also has its risks. It's not something to mess around with.
Exactly. That's where Grant's work is so helpful. He gives us this framework for understanding the shadow, not as something to be afraid of, but as a source of power, wisdom, something that can be integrated into a balanced, holistic, spiritual path.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Cults of the Shadow and our look at Aleister Crowley, what do you think Crowley's lasting impact is? How has his work, both the good and the bad, shaped our understanding of the left-hand path and the shadow?
That's a great question. I think Crowley's legacy is really complex. On one hand, he's still controversial, often linked with scandal and transgression. But on the other hand, he was this brilliant thinker, really innovative, pushed the boundaries of occultism, and help shape how we understand the left-hand path today.
And his work is still influencing people today, right?
Totally. Whether you love him or hate him, Crowley made a real impact. And his ideas, they still resonate with people who are, drawn to these mysteries of the shadow, the path less traveled.
Well said. As we finish up this journey through Kenneth Grant's Cults of the Shadow, I hope our listeners have a deeper understanding of the left-hand path, the power of the shadow, and how important it is to approach these things with respect, with discernment, and a good dose of self-awareness.
It's been quite a ride. And remember, the shadow isn't something to fear. It's something to understand. It's a source of challenge, but also transformation. And ultimately, it holds the keys to unlocking our hidden potential, embracing who we truly are.
Beautifully put. And until next time, keep exploring those hidden depths. And remember, dare to look deeper.